Hello, everybody. Hey, I'm Eric J. Olson, and today I'm coming at you live for Journey to $100 million. This is our podcast where we talk about our entrepreneurial journey as we're building our agency, Array Digital, into a $100 million per year national powerhouse. So most of our episodes are just me or my co-founder, Kevin Daisy, and also the co-host of the podcast, talking about something that's happening in our business, something we're struggling with, something we just discovered, and we're trying to share all the tips and tricks about how we're growing our agency so that you can benefit from our mistakes. But we also like to talk to other business owners to see what they're doing and to see if they can help you grow your business. And that's what we're doing today. So today I have with me Jennifer Crosswhite. Hey, Jennifer.
Hey, Eric. Good to see you today.
Great to see you as well. There's a lot of books behind you.
Yeah.
We're going to get to that in a second. Let me tell the audience a little bit about you. All right. So Jennifer Crosswhite is owner and proprietor of Tandem Services, a publishing services company that empowers authors to improve their craft, develop their writing careers, find community, and create effective commerce around their books. Learn all about how she spans both sides of the publishing desk, from author to former managing editor on this episode of Journey to $100 million. I think we needed a comma in there somewhere.
Probably. It's usually an editing problem.
Yeah, if you know someone that could help with that, that would be great.
You know, I might know somebody.
Well, Jennifer, tell us a little bit more about yourself and what you do.
Well, I live in Southern California, beautiful, sunny, not fall at all weather, Southern California, with my 2 young adult children and 3 cats. I am a book coach and editor and an author of 15 books and counting. I'm working on number 16 right now. And so my world pretty much revolves around words in all of their shapes and forms. So it's a lot of fun, especially if you enjoy books and words like I do.
So, okay, so you've written 15 books. That's impressive, and you're on number 16. That is not easy to do. So I did that one right there, $1 Million Journey, and it took actually, it's interesting because I did it the hard way, and I knew I was doing it the hard way, but I wrote it myself completely from scratch. It took 1 month to write it, and then it took about a year to edit it myself multiple times, move stuff around, figure out the point of the book, right? Because I just kind of like word vomited. And then I hired a professional editor who ripped through it, did a developmental edit, and then a line edit. And I had to hire a graphic artist to create the book cover and lay out every single page and sentence of the book. It was so much work. But I wanted to do that myself so that I could understand just how much work it was. Is my experience something that you typically come across with your clients? Like they kind of want to feel the pain a little the first time, and then they finally come to someone like you?
Yes, and I think there's a couple ways that people can approach it. Sometimes people are like, I have this idea, I have these notes, all sorts of places, I just don't know how to put it together. I really don't know if it even makes sense, if anyone wants to hear about it. So a lot of times I get people at that stage, which is actually pretty fantastic because we can work through it. But I do think it's important. I do a lot of educating on the process because whether you do it all yourself or you hire the bits out, you need to understand what you're buying. What is a good graphic designer? What is a good cover? What are all the pieces? And is this really worth the money? Because honestly, like with any business, there are plenty of people out there willing to take your money and not give you a good product. And so you really do have to be educated on knowing what it is you're buying, just like you would in any other aspect of your business.
Yeah. So why, if someone is, just kind of thinking about writing a book, what would you tell them? What is the reason that they should consider writing a book?
Lots of fantastic reasons, but particularly for business owners, I like to call it your $10 business card. So when you have a book, you are able to increase your impact in ways that you can't do in any other way. so I tell people, a book can go around the world and touch people you will never have any ability to ever meet. And so a book gives you authority. A book will open doors for you. There's just a lot of really fantastic ways. It's a very, very powerful marketing tool, especially if you begin to think of it in that way. I really encourage my business owners not to think about how much money they're going to make off the sale of the book. That's really not the goal. The goal is what kind of doors and opportunities is that book going to open for you? And there are a lot of them.
Do you have any examples of maybe clients or even yourself where the book has done something that they maybe couldn't do on their own or would have taken them forever to accomplish?
Oh, yeah. I mean, particularly people that are coaches and therapists a lot of times have been doing a lot of one-on-one work. But I mean, how many people can you see in a day? You get to capacity, you get maxed out. And so a book allowed them to start having speaking opportunities, opening a lot of doors for that. And then people would hear them speak, and then they would want to buy the book, and then they'd read the book and get very excited. And so that would lead to a digital course or a workshop or a 3-day weekend retreat, whatever that person is comfortable with. But I have seen people just explode from doing very small kind of one-on-one client work to kind of this huge impact to huge numbers of people, just because the book has given them that pathway. And it's really fantastic to see. I love that part of my job. It's just so fun to see.
That's great. What are some common mistakes that you have seen with people when they try to do it themselves and when they finally come to you?
Well, one of the problems is, as you know, a book is a really big project. It can be overwhelming. And so many people start out with great intentions, but then they get overwhelmed and they just kind of put it on the back burner. I often hear, I've had this book, I've been working on it for like a couple of years, maybe 5 years, sometimes 10 years. I had a client come to me, she's been working on a book for 10 years. Wow. And not making any progress because it doesn't ever float up to the level of priority. And so I'm able to sit here and say, let's set some goals, let's set some milestones, and let's get to work. And guess what? We can get done in 6 months.
Really? The whole thing? Wow.
Yeah, we can get the vast majority of the writing and the editing can really be done in 6 months for most people. Most people are able to carve out that amount of time to dedicate it over 6 months. I mean, you may not be able to say, oh, I can set aside 2 hours a week for the rest of my life. That might not happen, but most people can do it for a 6-month period of time. So I tell people, give me 6 months, we'll get it done. After that, you won't need to have that same amount of time commitment.
Very impressive. Now, what kind of setting of expectations do you have to do? Like here, as an example, if I were to say, it's going to be my first book and I want to be on the top 10 of, I don't know, New York Times bestsellers list. Is that reasonable?
Right.
Could that happen?
So New York Times, I love this example because New York Times in particular is a curated list. They pick who's going to be on that. You have to have certain sales from certain bookstores during a certain period of time. It's a very, 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 very tricky list to make. USA Today actually is probably more reachable, or Wall Street Journal. Some of those are just based on sales numbers. But for most people, the amount of books you would have to sell, I mean, some of them, I think for USA Today, it's about 6,000 books a day for a particular week, depending on who you're up against that particular week. If you're up against the week, Michelle Obama released her book, you're not going to have a very good chance for it, right? So I encourage people to set really more realistic goals. What do you want your book to do for you? How can it impact your business? Here's the really cool thing about a book. The copyright laws in the US are fantastic. Your copyright on your book is your life plus 70 years. I mean, what else can you create that is going to last till your great grandchildren and have that kind of impact? I mean, it's going to still be out there doing its thing while you are long gone. And so that kind of legacy, that starts shifting the paradigm. What can you accomplish in that? What can you allow that book to accomplish in that time? And it's really not so much about the money. The money is fantastic, of course. I mean, who wouldn't want to be a bestseller? But honestly, when I worked in traditional publishing, we still didn't know what were the ingredients that would make a bestseller. If we did, every book we put out would have been a bestseller, and most of them were not. And so really the goal is, What kind of impact do you want to make? Let's focus on that. And you're going to find yourself being so much more satisfied with that. You're going to exceed your expectations, and it's going to be a much more fantastic experience for you.
Many business owners that I know that have put out a book do not care at all about the sales. They're using it strictly for business development. If someone wants to do that, if they want to send a book to every prospect, as an example, every client, would you recommend a big book, a small book? I mean, like what's kind of like the minimum size, if you will, to be seen as legitimate?
Yeah, 30,000 words is probably the minimum. And in the publishing world, we deal with words, but most people think about pages. But if you think of like a 8.5 by 5.5 size book, your kind of typical size book, that's about 70-ish pages. So you're going to have kind of a very thin spine. Obviously, the more pages, the more heft it's going to have. I tell people 40 to 60,000 words is kind of the sweet spot. About 125 to 200 pages. Not too long, especially for a business book. You want people just to hit the highlights, be able to have a nice takeaway. You can do some formatting that makes it very easy to read. And you definitely don't want to be like in the 100,000 word. That's fiction. Those are the big, thick novels that people that love novels love to read that. But business people, we're busy. Your influencers, your gatekeepers, they're busy. They want to get to the high point and say, what do you know? How can you help me? So we just want to get to that quickly. And that's what also makes it a lot less intimidating for writing the project. It's very doable to do that in 6 months.
For me, when I take a trip and I get on an airplane, I usually grab a new book. And so I will read, and I live in a small area called Virginia Beach, Virginia, which means that we don't fly direct to anywhere. So there's always a hop, right? So I have 2 flights to get somewhere and then 2 flights to get back. And I probably have at least 4 hours of reading time in each direction. So what I've found is that I will read on the way there, I'll read on the way back, and then I usually have a little bit extra. I'm not a very fast reader, but I have a little bit extra, and then it just takes me forever to get through that little extra bit. For me, it seems like a round trip flight would be the right length for a book. Right. I mean, that's about right. And of course, like you say, everybody reads a little bit differently. And with the advent of audiobooks, those are very popular as well. But yes, having something that's just digestible, that's in that, I've got a good takeaway from that. I don't have so many ideas. I often tell people when we're working through the ideas of these books, that's another book. Save that idea for another book. That's a whole other thing we can build out. But let's just think about what are the high points we want to hit here, because you want to be able to have transformation for your reader. And you want it to be a very clear path from here's where we start, here's where we're going to end up, and here's what you're going to get by the time you're done with this book. Yeah, it's almost like a how-to and a reference book. It seems like when it comes to these business books, I think one of the mistakes I made is I put a ton of stories in there. I think people want stories, but I think I put too many stories in there actually, right? So I was definitely trying to tell a story as well as teach, but I think I should have focused a little more on the teaching aspect. Yeah.
Story is super powerful. I mean, we learn through story. That's how our brain is wired. It's always looking for information through story, and it will remember it so much more clearly than it would if you just give a list of instructions. I mean, we think about all the ways story has permeated our culture and the stories that are handed down. They give us a lot of information. And so I always really encourage people to include stories, but you have to have a purpose and a focus for it, and a reason why it's in there. Like with anything in the book, it always needs to be in there for a reason. Yeah.
Let's talk about your personal entrepreneurial journey. How did you get started, and what are some mistakes that you, if you had to do it again, would do differently?
Well, I never wanted to be an entrepreneur. Never. Like, if you would ask me of what are the possibility of you being an entrepreneur, I'd be like, you've got to be kidding. Why would I ever do that? No idea. And now I tell people I'm completely ruined. I could never work for anybody else.
Unemployable.
So, yeah, completely. I would be just way too bossy. So, I was working in traditional publishing, and my son, who is now 20, he was going into junior high at the time. And, junior high is nobody's favorite period of life. But he is on the autism spectrum. And so it was particularly challenging for him. And so trying to run this, this business in traditional publishing with all of its crazy hours and deal with him and his needs, I just finally said, you know what? No, I had all these people coming to me on the side projects and contract work and stuff like that. And I thought, well, I can make the leap. It's really not that scary because I have contract work. And so for the first couple of years, I did contract work for other companies, helping them very much what I do now, but helping them as a contractor instead of an actual employee. So I had more flexibility. Well, I really loved that flexibility. And I continued to get more and more clients on the side. And it really accidentally grew from there. It just sort of did. And I didn't really, and I would say that's probably if I had to go back and do it again, I would definitely be more intentional about everything. I spent a lot of time reacting to what my clients wanted. So if my client said, hey, I have a project, can you do it? I'd be like, sure, I'll drop everything and work on your project. And it will be on your time frame and your schedule and all that kind of thing. And so instead, what I have done now is I have my own, Michael Hyatt's Ideal Week has been fantastic for me as far as saying, no, I know the rhythms that work best for me. In the mornings, I do deep work. In the afternoons, I do client work. I have days I do not do any client work. And I was afraid to do that in the beginning. I was afraid to set boundaries with my clients. And you know what? They don't care. I've never lost a client over a boundary issue. We think in our heads, so much of being an entrepreneur, there's so many mindset games you have to end up playing because we think that they are like looking over our shoulder and they're like, well, why aren't you still working on my project at 8:00 at night? Aren't I a priority for you? Yeah. They have no idea how long things take. And so, yes, maybe it's something you can do in 2 weeks, but you tell them 4 or 5 because you have other things and you would like to have a life. And so having those kinds of boundaries, boy, I really wish I had learned that earlier. So I could have been more proactive instead of just reacting to what clients wanted.
That is really interesting because I've gone through the exact same process. Whereas we're constantly tweaking things here in my company, Ray Digital, because we just want them to work differently. But when I started, I thought that we had to do it the way that I was told businesses do things, right? So as an example, this is an example I use a lot when it came to collecting money. Number one, I hated to even ask to get paid. Like it just felt dirty, right? Yeah. And I didn't even like backing up to like the beginning of the interactions with the prospective client. I wouldn't want to tell them the actual price. I would wait till the very end of the negotiations. And then a lot of times like my price and their price just didn't mesh. And so I thought I had to like lower my price to do it dirt cheap. But once we started working, I just thought because of my background, net 30 is just the way it's done. And it took me a long, long time to like break that paradigm. And no, like that, it doesn't have to be 30. It can be whatever number I say. As a matter of fact, it could say, I could say, I need payment up front. Right. And just trying these different techniques, you find out some of them will work with clients. Right. Some of them, not many, but some of them just won't. Right. But it's up to you to establish how you want work to be done in your business.
It's so true. I mean, they are hiring you. You are the expert. So you kind of get to set those parameters and say, this is how I work. This is what works best for me. And honestly, when we are working in our strengths and the system that works best for us, it's going to be the best product. We're not going to feel resentful of our client because they're taking up too much of our time, because they didn't pay us enough for this project, because the payment schedule is crazy. We will have a much better relationship with our client, with our work, with ourselves when we set those appropriate boundaries. I really wish I had learned that earlier.
Yeah. You and me both. Jeez. Well, if we can only go back in time and do it over again. Right. But, you know, that's really kind of the point of this podcast, is that we want to share these experiences so that people that are either thinking about starting their own business, or they've already started, they're kind of struggling, or they just want to grow their businesses faster. Don't make our mistakes, right? Jennifer and I have made these mistakes. You could avoid them.
That's right. Learn.
Well,
But I also
Jennifer,
like to say everything's an experiment. So chalk it up to an experiment and try something different.
that's right. What's the worst that could happen, really? Right?
Exactly.
Using my example, if I were to say I want to get paid up front and someone says no, okay, well then I can fall back if I need to say, okay, well, how about if you pay me within a week of me invoicing you? That's the worst, right? And really, really the worst is you go back to what everyone else does, net 30. So,
right.
And if everything else fails, you can go get a job somewhere.
You could go do that, though you might be miserable.
Yeah, probably so. All right, Jennifer, I really appreciate your time. That has been very, very good and very insightful. If someone would like to reach out to you and find out more about how you could help them write a book, how should they contact you?
Yeah, the best way is through my website. It's Tandem Services Inc. INK.com. And reach out there. You have everything that you need on there, contact form and other information about what I do. And I'd love to hear from you.
All right, Jennifer. All right, everybody else. If you would like to check out more episodes just like this, where we share information about how to grow your firm faster, please go to our website at journeyto100million.com. Jennifer, I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I had a great time.